Hi, this is Mayor Bill Saffo. Events over the past several months have reignited an important public conversation about race in America. Wilmington has a unique and checkered past regarding race. Slavery, the 1898 Wilmington Massacre, segregation, the Wilmington 10 are all tragic parts of our city's history. The challenges that come from episodes of such magnitude don't simply evaporate. Their effects go noticed and unnoticed by many still here today. Generations in our community have worked to address the wounds of our past. The city of Wilmington has made strides, of which we can be proud of, yet much work remains to be done. That's why the City Council and I began a new initiative called Rise Together, to bring greater understanding to the challenges of race and equity in our community, and bring people together to build a stronger city for everyone who calls Wilmington home, regardless of color, class, or creed. To begin this work, I invited several community leaders to have a conversation about the challenges we face. I invite you to listen to these conversations and hope that they will lead to a greater understanding and see the possibilities of how we can rise together as we work to make Wilmington a stronger community for all of our neighbors. Thank you. I'm here today with Ms. Bertha Todd. And Bertha, thank you for coming here today and speaking with me and having a conversation about our community and where we are as a community. I know you're a lifelong educator here in Wilmington. You were my librarian way back at Williston 9th grade center many years ago. But Black Lives Matter. The mantra that a lot of people have used with me is, Bill, all lives should matter. Why do Black Lives matter?
Since I came to Wilmington in 1952 to work for the school system, and I agree, we all are God's children, and we belong to the human race, all of us. God made us, we didn't make ourselves. I have found that blacks are people of color, even during the Board of Education and school desegregation. I will not go into those incidents, but they applied to me. I was simply, in some instances, ignored. My thoughts didn't make one bit of difference to the individuals whom I was talking. All lives matter, but we have got to get a facet out that to ask ourselves, do people of color lives matter? If they don't, why? What is wrong with people of color that they don't matter? That, as James Baldwin said, we seem to be, at that time, now we've made a lot of progress in Wilmington since I came in '52, and I've helped a lot of that progress along because I grew up knowing that I mattered. I'm an individual, and I'll never forget speaking at a church here in Wilmington, I won't say which one, all white. I was the only individual, as I use sometimes, only black. I was the only individual of distinction, distinctively black. And the one question, well, several questions, I won't go through all of those questions. And someone said, well, Bertha, there's over 200 people there, males and females. What do the blacks want? I said, let me answer your question with another question. What is it you want out of life? Same thing you want, blacks want, people of color, Hispanics want, Asians want. We all are human beings. We want the same thing. Now you check yourself and see what it is you want out of life and you want your children to have out of life. They want the same. We all humans. If you know about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and that is not distinctive, not black, not white, just people, human beings reaching certain levels of the hierarchy. And we don't move from one until that one has been satisfied. And most people, as I'll never forget some Rotarians, and I spoke on Maslow's hierarchy of needs during Black History Month. And most of us die at loving and belonging. We never get to the self-esteem. We never get to the self-actualization. We died loving and belonging. This is what all humans want, irrespective of skin color. Hearts are the same. Blood runs the same way. I know that what one group wants, the other group wants. And there are no races anymore. There's a human race. If my DNA said that I'm from 19 countries, sometimes I wonder just what race did I really come from? But that's neither here nor there.
Did you have times when you thought this thing is going to come apart at the seams, the race issue, or the people?
Yes. There was one or two people, of course they're dead now, who fought us. Not the Hugh McCrae's II, not the George Roundtrees. They didn't fight us. But there were some others, and I wondered really why they were objecting to something, and we were simply trying to heal a wound and move towards healing our souls. I've spoken to about every group here in New Hanover County, all black, all white, mixed groups, you name it. But let them know we are not out there to get you. We're going into an unknown territory. And unfortunately, we have to bring it back up and lance this wound. And everything we do from now on is a part of the progress of reconciliation. Whether we take a huge step or whether we take a small one, we've got to continue to move on.
Very well said. And I want to say thank you for spending this time with me today and talking about some issues that sometimes people feel uncomfortable about. And so I just appreciate you and your knowledge and your passion for this community and making it a better place.
And I want to say this, because of you and others like you, I'm willing to do everything that I could do in order to help us move forward together.
Well, we're here in historic First Baptist Church with consider a good friend of mine and also a good friend of this community, Mike Queen. I know, Mike, you pastored here for 25 years, and it's a large church. And from your perspective as a pastor, as somebody that's been in the trenches, looking at things and looking for ways to improve the quality of life, not only of your congregation, but people in the surrounding area, how do you see it? What's your thoughts on it?
You know, I came to Wilmington in 1986, and probably in the first 10 or 12 years I was here, I was trying to be a part of some groups that were trying to deal with some of the divisive issues that we faced, and we didn't make much progress. Until one day, Ben David brought together a group of black pastors and white pastors. And the sad thing was, we didn't know one another. But I developed such a great relationship with Rob Campbell and with James Utley, two black pastors. And without going into the details, we came to a place, and I think if they were sitting here, they'd tell you the same thing. We trusted one another completely. We could talk about anything, and we did. And it was amazing for us to get to that point. There were 8 of us. There were 4 black pastors and 4 white pastors, and our churches reflected who we were. And we all brought 15 people from our churches together. And we'd have dinner on Tuesday night together. And at each table were 8 people, one from each of the 8 churches. And it was really a great experience, but it was all about building relationships. And I think until we are intentional about building relationships across these divides that we have, we just stay in our corner and think what we think and say what we say. And we just harden our positions on whatever it is. And so for me, it's all about relationships.
I deal with a lot of people in the community, in the city. And from your perspective, from your point of view, why is it so hard when you're looking at a problem that you know you can fix or possibly fix, but we can't talk about it? And if we do talk about it, people get into their respective corners and says, absolutely not. I'm not going to go there and don't even want to face it.
I've never had a problem talking about it, but my My growing up is so different than a lot of people. I grew up in a county in West Virginia that didn't have a single black person in it. 35,000 people in the county. It was a small county, and then I moved to the next county, and they had just integrated the schools, and then I went to Wake Forest, and my freshman year at Wake Forest was the first time 2 African-American football players came to play at Wake. They were in my class, Bob Grant, Butch Henry. But most of the students at Wake Forest were from North Carolina, and the vast majority of them had never gone to school with a black student. That's in my lifetime. As I watched people at Wake deal with that, it was amazing to me that the only way they could do it and thought they could do it was because they were really good football players. It's only recently that my university has begun to look at its history. And the school was founded in 1834. And people died and left their slaves to Wake Forest College. And Wake Forest sold them and used that money to start the endowment. It's so deeply rooted and ingrained here. And I think sometimes people think, well, wait a minute, the slaves were freed, so we took care of everything there, now we're all equal. Well, we know what happened here in 1898. Everything wasn't equal. And then, 64, the Voting Rights Act, and all the things that have happened in the civil rights movement and everything. And even today, there are inequities. And we could say we all function under the same laws, but you and I both know that everything's not equal. I think racism is learned. You're not born with it. Yeah. Nobody's born that way, and you learn that, and the things that we learn when we're young stay with us for a long time.
What people thought in 1898 and what people thought in 1971 is light years away from what people think today. But it seems to have been the flashpoint, at least in the early 20th century, all of the 20th century, and now even into the 21st century that we're dealing with. Any thoughts?
So for 150 years, people have worshiped in this room, including the Sunday after the 1898. And the man who was pastor here then, he had just come to be the pastor of the church. And Jim Everett wrote the history of our church called, it's Heritage of Hope. There's that word hope again. His sermon was published in the News and Observer in Raleigh. I think the massacre was on a Thursday or Friday, and he preached this on the following Sunday. Sometimes special emergencies arise when evildoers become the common enemy of the community, and the community must put forth its hand and execute justice. There is purification by breezes, but sometimes nature sees fit to use a whirlwind. The violence of the whirlwind may destroy some things, but who will say it was not good and needed, that it was not ordered by God? The fact that a few Negroes were shot was a mere incident. You can't make an omelet without breaking a few eggs. The primary purpose was not to kill, but to educate. And it's hard to imagine that. And the fact that that all took place less than 50 years before I was born is another amazing thing to me. Dad used to say, the only problem you can't solve is the one you won't talk about. And we can't ignore the problems that we face. That ignoring them doesn't make them go away. It only makes them worse. And so it's tedious, it's painful. I'm sure that you must think that progress is you inch along and when you want to take big steps. But as long as we keep talking, as long as we keep talking to people who don't agree with us and people who are different from us, I think we have a chance at finding out what makes their heart flutter. What is it that they need? Where is their hope? And once you understand their hope and they understand your hope, then I think you begin to find some common ground.
Frankie, I just want to say thank you for being here. I got Frankie Roberts here with me from Link Incorporated. You've been a lifelong resident of Wilmington, North Carolina. You went through the school system here. We're about the same age. I'm your senior by a few years, but we've known each other for a long time. And I know you started Link in 2000, and a lot of people don't realize what you do, but you have created a tremendous nonprofit that has helped people that come out of the prison system and get them reacclimated into society and hopefully make them productive, good citizens. And we appreciate all of your work because that slows down and stops, or hopes to stop, all the recidivism that we have seen over the years. But going through the school system, creating a nonprofit, having a business here, what do you see? What do you feel? What is it that this moment in time is telling you or telling us?
A lot of civil unrest, from where I sit, civil unrest. A lot of opportunity, mixed with difficulty. But I would say, for the most part, it has forced our community to discuss race in a more authentic manner. Because now, cross-ethnic group, we're having conversations that I don't necessarily think we've had in the past. And in an authentic manner.
Very much so.
Yes.
Are we making any progress?
I would say progress have been made, but progress has also been stifled. I know that sounds like an oxymoron, but so when I look at the progress, I think people in the generation prior to me, I'm 55, I think they probably measure progress a little different than my generation. And then the generation now after me, or the 2 generations after me, probably measure it even differently and probably would say we haven't made any progress. And so I think it's almost, when we discuss it, we almost have to put it in a historical context. My mother had me and father had me at a late age, 44 years old. So when I used to come home and tell my mother how I was being treated, she said the same thing every time, and she never deviated from it. And she said this: Frank, God made us all just alike. So in that context, that meant all lives matter. But what I was articulating to her was black lives didn't matter at Roland Grice and Hargett. But she always said, Frank, all lives matter. And I always say, well, Ma, you just don't know. And because of it, I developed a behavior and attitude of mediocrity, because it was expected for me to be mediocre, not to be excellent. And so I minimized, marginalized my education to survive.
So going to into this discussion about Black Lives Matter, your mother was saying all lives matter.
That's correct.
And I hear a lot of that from constituents and citizens that tell me all lives matter, Bill. Why are you just focusing on Black Lives Matter? And why is it at this time that this is what we're talking about? And are we discriminating by just saying just Black Lives Matter? In the context of what we see today, what do you think?
My friend sent me something earlier, and it says, I say Black Lives Matter because all didn't cover black when they said all men are created equal. Because if you look at the founding document, black people didn't matter. They were described as animals. And then he said, Black Lives Matter because all didn't cover black when they said with liberty and justice for all, that we weren't covered. So when we say Black Lives Matter, and because that's, yeah, I'm on that bandwagon, it's as a reminder that I don't want to go back in the context of America when it was legal to put dogs and fire hoses on us, because I was saying I'm equal, I'm all, and they say, no, you're not, and I'm gonna prove it to you. And I think when people say all lives matter, they try to dismiss that context in that period in America, that George Floyd, and when people saw that, I think on a TV screen, yeah, it's very easy to say, man, we're going back to a time that we didn't like. So I'm reminding people, hey, Black Lives Matter. And maybe some people might want to put Black Lives Matter too. But we have to, when I say have authentic conversations, yeah, that was a time that most white people don't want to discuss when our lives didn't matter.
I want to say thank you for sitting down and talking with me, Derek. Derek MACLEOD of St. Andrew's Covenant Presbyterian Church, one of the largest and old church here in the community. And this church has, of course, been a stalwart and also a church that has also given a lot back to this community and to this city for many, many years. Kind of tell me how what you see out there and what you hear.
Right. I'm grateful to have this chance to talk with you and to represent this community that I love, both the church and Wilmington. I am new to the city still, but I'm not new to being white. I've been white my whole life. And my best friend in high school, his name is Jeff. We played rugby together, and you have never seen anything as beautiful as watching Jeff on a rugby field. Like, his legs were tree trunks. I watched him straight arm several guys that couldn't get close to him. He was the first guy in our school to dunk a basketball. I remember he wanted to hang out with me, and I couldn't believe. I thought, did he mean another Derek? Like, this guy was just really, I love him. And thanks to Facebook, we're connected again. But one day we were outside playing basketball, and a car drove by and rolled down the window, and this guy shouted out, "Hey, N-word." And Jeff, whose father was black and mother was white, cried like a baby. I learned that day there's something that Jeff experiences in life that I do not. And there's a terrible power that can be unleashed. And he has to deal with something that I didn't understand. So, of course, all lives matter. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about this. Sure. But we know that because all lives matter, it matters to us when all lives are not being cared for and loved. And we're hearing loudly, we're seeing for 8 minutes in front of us that a black life is treated by important parts of our population, by some people, without the same love and care. We're in a church. I'm a pastor. Why does Jesus tell a story about a lost sheep? A shepherd has 100 sheep. One is lost. He leaves the 99 to go find the one. That's ridiculous. Jesus, you got 99 sheep. Count your blessings. You lost one, but oh well. Move on. You might lose some more if you're not careful. Take care of what you have. Don't worry about the other one. But the story is not that. The story is, I got to go find my lost sheep because we're not the same if we're not all together. And so that shepherd risks everything to go and bring the family all together. That's our story. That matters to us.
How do we as a community bridge that? How do we kind of bring it out where we can really have the frank conversations with our neighbors to understand what it means to them and what we as a community can do to improve upon that?
My colleague, African-American colleague, he wanted to be in the pulpit, which I get, right? If I'm going to preach at your church, put me in the driver's seat. Sure. So he preached a powerful sermon about Black Lives Matter. And later that week, I was walking up Market Street, a car pulls over really quickly, someone jumps out of the car, and my first thought was, I'm about to get it. I get emails too, I thought, I'm about to get it. And this gentleman from my church walked out, and this is a Southern gentleman par excellence. This guy's probably got more seersucker suits in his closet. And he said, now Derek, I need to talk to you. And then he told me a story about growing up in Wilmington as a very privileged white man and the pain he carries, knowing that his beloved Wilmington has not been the same for people in our neighborhood of color. And he wept on the street with me. He's not a, you know the names we have for each other, right? Like radicals and leftists and all the ways in which we hurt and divide each other. He's just a good old Southern boy who is starting to recognize that there are other stories that he needs to engage. One of the challenges is that we're not going to be able to have this conversation without offending people. But I don't know anything in my life that I've learned that was really powerful that I didn't first get offended by it. Because it confronts you, right? I did not know that. I thought everything was fine. I thought I knew what was happening. And then something happens in your life that disrupts it, upsets it, and you're frustrated, sometimes offended. But that's usually because you've encountered something that's powerful. So we're going to have to be okay with being offended. But that's not where we stay. Can you hang in with each other? Do you love your city enough? Do you love the neighborhood you live in? Do you love this world enough to hang in and figure out how we're going to listen to each other? Offend each other, but work through it.
And I would hope that in this moment, when we can reflect, to see what can we do to improve the lives of our fellow citizens, that we take it seriously and that we consciously talk to one another. And I think that we all have a role to play here. Judge James FAISON, 5th Judicial District here in New Hanover County, a lifelong resident of the area. Kind of want to get your take as to what you feel about it and what you see and, you know, what your hope is with everything that has been happening around the nation.
The issue Black Lives Matter, first of all, I think that before any resistance is given to, let's say the phrase, let's not even talk about the organization yet, let's talk about the phrase, Black Lives Matter, before any resistance should be offered to that, I think that a conversation needs to be had. And a quick study of the history of the Black Lives Matter movement, which it is now, would reveal to the individual looking at it that really it didn't start as a movement. The phrase Black Lives Matter started as a hashtag over social media communication between 3 African-American females who witnessed the acquittal of George Zimmerman, who killed Trayvon Martin. And it was a young African-American male, who we all know the story. He was walking away from the convenience store, and the only thing that he was in possession of was a bag of Skittles and a cup of tea, and where George Zimmerman had a firearm. And the boy died after their encounter. And so the whole point of that was, wow, again, here it is, the criminal justice system is allowing a young black life to be disregarded by the acquittal of this man who killed him. And of course, the jury made the decision, and that was the court of law. But in the court of public opinion, it was a different outcome in the court of public opinion. So it caused an outcry to occur and say, well, his life mattered to his mother, to his father, to his cousins and friends. He's another young black male whose life matters and mattered. And so the outcry is, let the nation please pause. Let us stop for a minute and acknowledge the fact that black lives matter too. They weren't saying black lives matter to the exclusion of other lives, because to do that will put themselves in the same position of those that we're trying to fight against that mindset. They were saying black lives matter also. Black lives matter just as well as. So they're saying that's really all that was about. It wasn't saying that black lives matter to the exclusion of other lives and other lives don't. That would be ridiculous. That's wrong. No, all lives matter, clearly enough. But the way systemic racism was occurring and the way systemic imbalances were occurring and the disparate impact on the African American community with regard to different opportunities and law enforcement encounters and things of that nature, the indication was that black lives did not matter. So it really was a hashtag, just a phrase to say that our lives matter too. So I'm optimistic that the torch is still burning bright. It's in your hands, in my hands now. And I look forward to passing it to the next generation and to preserve that hope and preserve that dream and to make opportunity equal for everybody.
I know you have a great bank here at Live Oak, co-founder, over 600 jobs now here in the community, one of the fastest growing job centers and job creators in the community and in the region. And kind of want to just get your take and your thoughts about what you see out there and what you feel.
We've been a major participant in Hometown Hires, now Step Up, that you're quite familiar with. We've been a major supporter of GLOW, Girls Leadership Academy of Wilmington, which is going quite well. We now have almost 400 students at GLOW. My only experience with massive success is by the lady in New York that started what GLOW is today. So Ann Tisch of the Tisch family, an incredibly wealthy family in New York City, 25 years ago started what is GLOW in Harlem. And 6 grades, 6th grade to 12th grade, 100 girls in each grade. 100% graduate from high school and 100% go to college. That's what we're trying to replicate, right? So it is sad but true. When our girls go to GLOW in the 6th grade, they're fundamentally 3 grades behind. And it is the goal of the management team out there, the teachers and Todd who runs the place, to have functional parity by the 9th grade. And we're getting there. And that's the cycle that we've got to break. And if we can get there and they can see success on the other side, then they can capture the world. So what's interesting are the times that we live in and everything that we're talking about that's happened in the last 4 or 5 months. That's just the purpose of this interview, right? So that's an interesting convergence between that and people actually wanting to help and the interest rate environment that we're in. So what are you going to do with your money? Might you take some portion of your money and invest in one of these businesses that can help minorities? I think there would be I think it would be relatively simple to raise a fund in Wilmington to address those sort of things.
And I know you're passionate about it, and I know that the amount of time and effort and money that you've invested in GLOW, in the education part of it, you've put your money where your mouth is, and you're not just talking about it, you're actually doing something about it. Looking forward to working with you in any capacity I can to make a lot of the things that you talked about happen.
So a lot has changed, and a lot has not changed. Everything was separate. Very few things were equal. The bus stations had separate waiting rooms, but there were separate libraries, and all of this. And this was all deemed appropriate by the government. And there was an insidious creeping of psychological abuse, I think, all of the time that I was here. And that is why I left the day after I graduated. And came back only because I had an aging mother. But things have gotten better, I have to say, in some cases. You know, the current administration is not helping. I see it. So I think there's a lot of work to do. And I think Black Lives Matter came into existence because there are so many things that indicate to a lot of people that Black lives don't matter. And so I think that is why they are. And young people that just never knew what we went through to start with, but they just see it in the moment and say, well, this surely cannot be. So I think there are a lot of changes that are happening and some more that need to happen.
Now, did you graduate from Williston?
Oh, yes.
Williston.
Williston, the greatest school under the sun. That was one of the bright lights in our lives. We had teachers who knew the situation when we were leaving, knew what we were going to be met with. So they always said to us, you know, you have got to be 10 times better than white people to be equal, if you're equal then. So that is what people like BERTHA TODD, who is almost our last living one, instilled in us, because we had textbooks that were used with pages torn out, and all kinds of things that were used and non-existent. And we had to overcome that. And our teachers made sure that we did. And we ended up with the best education that I think anybody could have had anywhere. So I think the separate but equal society was never equal. But I think there has been an effort to balance the playing field some. The statues coming down to me was encouraging. You know, there were over 260 white Southerners who died in the Civil War. There were over 360 Northerners who died. And the issue is, of course, the Civil War was a war fought against the United States of America because of the slavery situation. Mm-hmm. And while I understand perfectly what people who mourn their ancestors feel, I do. I can't help but feel it. Sure. But what folks need to realize is their ancestors were trying to make sure that my ancestors stayed in bondage or were killed or were ripped apart from their families. So I think things need to be put in the right light, and to glorify this, to me, is a mistake, and it contributes to the psychological abuse that people who grew up here have. It's just kind of inside of you, and sometimes you don't even know it. Mm-hmm. The K-Fit Country Club, now that 17th Street is cleared, I can go by and glance over at the country club. Well, it has no black members. Mm-hmm. You know, the Wilmington Club across the street here. Mm-hmm. But all of these things were just a way of life for us, and it didn't even make us realize what was going on. As I said, our teachers helped us, and then we left. And when we left, we could see what could have been here. So for a long time, we didn't know it. The things that we knew were more obvious, like you couldn't eat at the lunch counter. It was more obvious than the stature. It all tied together in the end. But those types of things, you couldn't try on clothes. Black people couldn't. So all of these things were the things, there were so many things you could not do. We could be here all day. Mm-hmm. But because I got away, I was able to look back and see what was so very wrong. And that is part of the reason, another part of the reason I came back, to try to see if there was something I could do to make a little bit of difference in this town, and maybe try to be up and coming. Mm-hmm. And clean cut as I could be. My friends still can't believe it. To start this program to help old people. And so our lives have all been so mixed up with emotions as to what's right, what's wrong, why was it right, why was it wrong, what do we do now? Do we accept it now that I'm old, I'm 74, you know, do I just let it go? or what? And I am so encouraged to see younger people who are questioning some things. And I sometimes question their not their motives, but their ways of doing things, which is all a part of the struggle. All of the things you see going on are a part of the struggle. And if you have to make a difference, you have to be a certain way. You have to do certain things that you may not want to do. You have to have credibility, or nothing works. It can't be all emotion. You know, you have to have your facts in order. And I am proud to see the folks who are doing it. And of course, to have multiple races of people is nothing new. White people, Jews always participated in sit-ins way back in the 50s and the 60s. So that is really nothing new. It's just come in my mind, full circle.
Where do we go from here?
Well, I hope people will realize that this is a time that needs to be examined. You know, all of this is not going on without reason, that things need to be examined, and that people can sit down and talk about it. And really talk about it, not just black people, but white people who were Civil War descendants. I'd like to sit down with them and talk about it, because nothing is going to change until we start the conversation. And you need to make good trouble sometimes, but you need to do it in the right way to get the effect that you want and to get the outcome that you want. You know, you got to get out and vote. You got to do more than march. So you got to get down in those proverbial trenches, and let's sit down and talk about this. If we fight, we fight. You know, meet on neutral ground and talk about some of these things, because some of the things are very troubling. I think right always prevails, and some people believe right is one thing, and some people believe right is other things. But right, I think, always prevails in the end. I've had people who have come up to me in a church at the beach, and a little old lady came up one time. I had made a presentation, and she came up to me and she said, "You spoke so well, you're so articulate." Well, that immediately said to me, she didn't expect me to be articulate. Where she was just really giving me kudos, saying, "You really," and she didn't think about what it was going to mean to me. And that's what everybody's got to think about. What is this going to mean to the other person? And it just is an interesting place to be at this point in my life. It really is interesting to sit back and watch the young folks. And I see some of the mistakes they're making, and they're going to make them. We made them too. But I have hope that in the end, and I hope that's not forever from now, that things are going to get better. They may not get superb, but I think they can get better. I hope they're not discouraged when things don't happen as fast as they want, because it took 100 years for us to get to this point in this city. From 1898, 120 years to get here. So we have got bad history, and we can kind of lay around and wallow around in the fact that we had a bad history, or we can do something about changing some of the things. Mm-hmm. And I think the changes that are coming, while they can be scary for some people, both probably black people and white people, it can be scary. They are long overdue.